so we're going to do things a little bit different tonight than normal. Most everybody here knows what we've been going through as a family. My wife and I, my kids, with the loss that we've suffered. It's hard. There's a lot of things that are hard to deal with that. And I know there's a lot of people in here that have gone through some of the same things. And it's refreshing to know that there are people here that can walk us through that and help us with that. One of the big things that I've been struggling with since this, other than just the aspect of our loss, is studying the Bible. That's something that I struggle with anyways. I've got the attention span of a 2-year-old. I've got to read a magazine article like 5 or 6 times to where I really understand it, so the Bible's even harder for me to understand. And since everything that's happened, it's gotten even harder than normal. It's not that there's a bitterness or anything like that, or that I don't have the will to try to learn or to get into the Word, but whenever I get to have some quiet time, or I try to focus and block everything out, I start thinking about everything that's been going on and everything that we're dealing with. And it's actually made for better prayer time. I've had better conversation with God than I've ever had, because what will happen is I start thinking about things, and then I automatically go into just conversation with Him, just enjoying speaking with Him. And but it's been hard to focus enough to understand His Word. So really, for the last month, I haven't been able to really dig into the Word and learn. And then Monday afternoon, Josh called me, or Monday morning right before they left, he called me and said, "Hey man, I got a big favor for you." I said, "Oh, this is not going to be good." And because usually if it's something that's just kind of questionable, he doesn't give me a choice. He just tells me, "Hey, you're doing this for me this weekend." So when he asked for a favor, I said, "This is going to be rough." So I called him back, and he said, "No, look, I need you to lead the service on Wednesday." I said, "Man, I can't do that. There ain't no way." So he said, "Well, don't answer it now. Pray about it, and then I'll call you back tonight before I get on the plane in Miami to London and see what your answer is." And I was like, "Josh, I just don't think that I can do that. I've never done anything like that. I don't teach a Sunday school class. I've never done anything like this, And he said, "Well, then it ought to be a challenge to you." Well, there you go. You got me. He suckered me into it. So he calls me back later on that night, and so I'm asking him, look, is there guidelines I go by? Is there a series that you're going off of? You got a book I can read? Anything like that? And he's already gone at this point, So he said, "No, you just do whatever you want." I can't just do whatever I want, Josh. You got to tell me what to do. So he said, "Well, look, I'm about to get on a plane. I'm going to London, and I'll have my computer, and I'll go ahead and type everything up for you. You can read it word by word. I'll do the whole thing for you." I said, "Okay, then I guess it'll work. I'll do it." So, I go to sleep that night, check my email, no message from Josh. And I don't like that. I like to have things prepared, so no message from Josh. So I didn't sleep well Monday night, so every time I'd wake up, I'd pull my phone out and check my email. Still no message from Josh. Tuesday morning, we get up to go to our accountability group. Still no message from Josh. And I said, "Yeah, he got me." So I talked to him later on Tuesday, and he said, "Well, I haven't done it yet, but I think I'm going to give you some options you could go off of on Matthew 5. And I said, "Oh, man, I thought you were already going to have it typed for me." So I'm really starting to panic, because I'm nervous about doing it anyways. I don't know how I'm going to teach a Bible lesson to people that know way more about the Bible than me. So I start panicking. I get on my phone and I'm Googling, how do I start a devotion? Or, what do I do? And everything says, well, keep the devotion less than 10 minutes. And I was like, Josh told me it had to be 20 minutes. So what am I going to do? So I start reading all this different stuff, and that didn't work. I couldn't find anything. So then I started just kind of flipping through Scripture. And I was like, man, I've been having problems studying the Word. I don't know how I'm just going to find something and preach on it. And I start pulling all this different stuff up on the computer and on my phone. And I get to a website, no idea what it was, how I got there. I erased it after on accident, so I can't go back. But and it would say, it would show the scripture. It would show the verse, but it wouldn't show the whole verse. It would just kind of give a little bitty commentary. So I'm just looking at it, and my thumb hits something, and it pops up. Go into 2 Corinthians chapter 12, verse 9. So I said, I'll read it. So I read the verse, and it was like somebody reached out of the Bible and punched me in the face. It was awesome. It was like God saying, you don't have to just go through a whole chapter of the Bible and understand it. I can speak to you through one verse. And it reminded me of how much power He can put into one verse of the Bible. The verse says, "But He said to me, my grace is sufficient for you, for my power is made perfect in your weakness. Therefore, I will boast all the more gladly of my weaknesses, so that the power of Christ may rest upon me. It blew me away. So I'm sitting there and I'm thinking, awesome, I found a verse. What do I do now? How do I teach on the verse? I don't know how to teach the Bible. I'm thinking, I'm going to go to church Wednesday night, and I'm going to be preaching or teaching a Bible verse to Mr. Bobby Walker, who knows more about the Bible than I think that I'll ever know, or all these other people that are here that have way more Bible knowledge than me. How do I do that? What am I going to do with that one verse? So I'm thinking, I'm not qualified to do this. I'm still praying. What am I going to do? I've got no experience. I've never been to seminary. I don't have much Bible knowledge. And I'm sitting there praying about it, and God says, you got one thing that you can share. I've got a story. So I know it's a little bit different for a Wednesday night. We normally do a devotion, and I know you came to hear a devotion and to learn the Word. But I don't think there's any better way for me to explain that Bible verse than to talk about what I'm going through right now in my walk with Jesus. I'm sorry that you came to hear, a devotion. I don't want to let you down, but there could be somebody in here that could really help out, that somebody could benefit from my story. Or somebody could see that a regular guy like me can sit up here and tell my story to the church, and they can go to work tomorrow and talk to a coworker and share their story with them. So hopefully, somebody will get benefit out of this. Before I get started with it, I'll introduce myself. I know most everybody here, some people I don't. My name's Jeremy Shesby. I've lived in Picayune most all of my life. I work at Charlie's Custom Colors in town, selling paint. Been there for 7 or 8 years now. I'm married to Amy Leah. We've been married for 7 years. She's pretty awesome. And she's a labor and delivery nurse at Highland Hospital. And the best thing about my family is my 2 little boys. I've got a little boy named Ryder and a little boy named Steele. Most of you probably know them. They're the little crazy dark tan kids with bright blonde hair. And if you don't know them, you probably wanted to punch them at some point because they probably drove you crazy. This is kind of going to seem off the wall, but I've got a reason for it, and I'll get to it later. I picked the name Steele for my son a long time ago before I was married. I always wanted to name my little boy Steele. I don't know why. I just thought it was an awesome name. My wife didn't like it, but I got my way. We named him Steele. And then we had Ryder, and I said, we can't just have a normal name for the second one. We got to have an off-the-wall name for that one too. So we came up with Ryder, and then, after Steele had grown a little bit, he was 3 before Ryder was born, we sat down and looked at the meaning of the names. So we look at the meaning of the name Steele, and it means strong, strong-willed, and stubborn. And I'm pretty sure that they met our son before they wrote that definition out. And then the other one, Ryder, his name means mounted warrior in medieval knight. And he's as wild and tough as the day is long. So it fits him perfect too. I'll kind of start from the beginning with my testimony. It's just a pretty ordinary testimony, but it still has a lot of meaning because I was saved, just like everybody else in here. I was born with a hole in my lung as a baby, and they were going to have to do surgery on it to repair it. They went in, I don't know how, they looked at it through an x-ray or something, and they got the group of doctors together to figure out what they needed to do, and they needed to go in and do surgery. So my parents and my family, they came in and they prayed over me. And before they go to do the surgery on me, they check one more time just to get a grasp on what all they need to do. And it's unexplainably gone. And I tell that story because, just to show the power of prayer and what it's done in my life from the time I was born. And also just to show and kind of paint a picture of the family that I was blessed with. I was born into a strong, believing family. I was saved, at a young age. We went to church, and when I was in elementary school, my dad worked in New Orleans. We lived down there. We went to church down there if we weren't up here on the weekend. And, they would do things a little bit different. It was, at the end of the service, say this prayer, raise your hand. So I did that at like 5 years old or whatever, and went up to the front. And, thought I was saved. Then later on, probably 8 or 9, I still was pretty young, but I was old enough to kind of get a grasp on the fact that that's not how you get there, So I went through it again, and I accepted Christ, and I was saved at that age, but I was still at a young age. When I was 12, we moved up here to Picayune full time, And we started attending church at First Baptist. So we had never been baptized. My sisters and I were all three saved. We were believers, but we'd never gone through baptism. So we did that there whenever we joined the church. But you hear of being a Christian as a kid, or even as an adult now, unless you know somebody that you can really talk to about it, or you have somebody that's really honest, you kind of get the picture of a Christian as somebody that doesn't struggle with doubt or anything like that. You think that, or as a kid I did, I thought, once you're saved, I don't have to deal with that anymore. So, as a teenager, we were at Centrifuge one year, and I'd been struggling with that for a while, thinking, I know that I believe in God and I love Him, and I've accepted Him, but why do I still doubt things sometimes, or why do I still struggle with things? And I can remember sitting down with Tim Tollison, who was our minister, our youth minister at that time, and he talked it out with me, and I kind of rededicated my life right there, and it was nice to be able to sit down and talk to somebody, and it's nice to be at this church now and to see the youth minister that our kids here have, how good of a job Keith does and how good a job Josh does. Just being able to sit down and talk to you and how honest they are when they're preaching to you. It really means a lot. It shows you a lot. It helps you deal with a lot more when they're honest, and it's not, you think you're the only one that has to deal with stuff like that. I grew up, I got through school and tried college out. Didn't really work for me. And in 2007, I got married. And then in 2008, we had our first child, Steele. He came 8 weeks early. I was at work one morning. We just got some coffee made and stuff. We're hanging out, and Amelia calls and says, I think my water just broke. No, your water didn't break. We still got 2 months, No, I think my water broke. So I get in the car, go home, pick her up, and we drive on up to Hattiesburg, to the hospital. And sure enough, her water broke. Don't know why, but it broke. So they put us in the room, and I can remember sitting there in the room, and the first doctor comes in, and he starts explaining to us, we're going to start you on some steroids. We need to build the strength of the lungs up in the baby. We're not going to prevent the birth, but we hope that it stalls out for a while. You're not going home until we have the baby. And they at one point they were saying they would hope maybe even a month she could hold off. And I was like, man, we're going to be in the hospital for a long time. So then the next group of doctors come in. There was 2 doctors that came in. One was a neonatologist, and then just a regular OB doctor. They came in and they start giving us percentages. This is what can happen. There's a 50% chance that if he comes out and he's not breathing, he's going to have problems. Or, there's a 25% chance he won't make it from the beginning. And they're telling us all these different percentages and stuff like that. And, we're kind of blown away. I don't know what to think, and I remember him saying, if he comes out screaming, crying, we're doing really good. He's probably going to be okay. There still can be some issues, but if he comes out crying, his lungs are working. So, that was Monday night. Tuesday morning, she starts going into labor. So it didn't last very long. She starts going into labor, and I can remember sitting there all day. All I could think about was, I hope that baby cries when he comes out. I hope he's screaming and crying when he comes out. So we go through sitting there and hanging out and waiting on it to come. It didn't take a real long time, but for a few hours, we're just don't know what to think. So we're praying, and we get through it, and the baby, they go to deliver the baby, and they bring all the NICU workers into the room with us because they don't know what to expect, so they're getting everybody prepared, and they've got their suits on. It looks like E.T., like on the scene from E.T. when they're about to doctor him up and all that. So it's just crazy in the room. They've got orange suits on, and they've got the lamp in there and the little box to put him in. You don't really know what's going on. And so the baby comes out, and he's screaming. So I'm pumped, and they say, you want to cut the cord? And I can't feel anything. My arms are numb, I can't do any of that. Well, so I'm able to cut the cord. I think I'm going to pass out, but I'm pretty excited because I heard a scream, so we're okay. And I get the camera to go run take a picture. I run to one end of the room, and the ladies from the NICU have grabbed the baby to take to Amelia so she can see it. So then I get around all the stuff in the room, and I get to take a picture there, and she's giving them back, and they've already hauled him down the hallway. So I said, man. So they take him back to the NICU, and they do their thing there, and they send us to a room. Well, later on that evening, they called us and said, look, you can come into the NICU now, and you can see the baby. And I can remember going in to the room for the first time and seeing him in his little box or whatever that thing's called. It had the holes with the gloves on it. And I can remember sticking my hands in that little box and him holding my finger. And it was the best feeling I had ever had. So we spent a little time in there, and then we go back to the room, and we're sleeping. I don't remember if it was that first night or the second night, but we're laying in bed sleeping. and we get a call on the phone from the NICU. Y'all need to get down here. There's something going on with your baby. So we rush back down to the NICU. I think I was pushing her in a wheelchair. We go in there, and we get in there, and he's gray. Has no color. They don't know what's wrong. He's losing blood. They're still not sure exactly why. Something to do with the liver. So they start giving him blood transfusions. And over the next few days, they continue to give him blood. And then they still can't figure out what's wrong. They've done some CAT scans, and they can see that his liver's bleeding. They don't know what caused it, why it's doing it. They don't know how to fix it. They told us there's not much you can do for a liver on a baby. It's got to heal itself pretty much. So, we just don't know what to think. Everything's going crazy, and we're praying. We've got a lot of people praying for us. There was actually a lady in the NICU. She was Catholic, but she came up and asked us if we wouldn't mind if she prayed for us. And she said her mother that lives in Michigan makes rosary beads, and she sends them down to her. And if there's a baby that's in the NICU, they like to give them the rosary beads. So she asked if she could give us rosary beads. And her mom's got a group of old women that get together and make beads, and they pray for babies, and they pray for babies in the hospital in Hattiesburg. So yeah, I'm not Catholic, but I'll take all the prayers I can get. And so we had a lot of people praying for us, and the whole time it was crazy and it was scary and nerve-wracking. But we always had that feeling that everything was going to be okay. Well, then when he was about 2 weeks old, they call us back in. Another doctor comes in and calls us in his office and sits us down and says, we've done all we can do here. We're going to have to ship him down to Ochsner in New Orleans and let them go with it from here because we don't know what caused it. At one point, they had us sat down and told us that it could have been a tumor. They thought maybe it was a tumor that he was born with, and he's got some kind of cancer on his liver already. So, this is just all kinds of craziness at once. Nobody can tell us what's going on. And we go to New Orleans, and I don't like driving to New Orleans anyways, but driving to New Orleans while your baby's in the hospital is rough. So we get down there, and we can't see him at first, so we finally get to go back there. And the NICU there is huge. There's probably 40 kids in the NICU down there, And we go up, and we're looking at him. They've got him all taped up, and his IVs and everything. And the doctor is supposed to be one of the best neonatologists around. He comes up to talk to us, and he was the most negative person I've ever talked to in my life. He walks up and says, I don't really know why they sent him down here. They've done everything that we can do already. All we can do is give him blood. We've got a great pediatric surgeon here, but he's not going to operate on a liver because a liver is just too hard to deal with. So we're not going to do anything different than they are, and there's a chance that he can make it. But then if he does make it, he's giving us these crazy numbers like, there's a 90% chance that he might not make it. But if he does, then there's an 80% chance that that's going to get infected, and he won't make it through that. So we're just crushed, And later on that day, the surgeon comes up and tells us, look, I've been looking at his charts, and he said he's not one of my patients, but if it comes to it, he will be one of my patients. If I've got to work on his liver, we're going to work on his liver. And it was refreshing. We just don't know what to think. We're dealing with this guy that's negative, and he's not giving us a good outlook at all. And then all of a sudden, another doctor that's not even seeing still has gone out of his way to check on him, see how he's doing. And then, a few days later, he pulls us to the side in the hallway and says, hey, I'm still keeping up with him. He recognized us. Says, I'm still keeping up with him. And he's getting better. Everything looks good. I really think he's going to be okay. And, that meant a lot to us. For a doctor to go out of his way. And that was an answered prayer there just for somebody positive in our life that knows what they're doing to pull us to the side and do that for us. Well, he stayed for 2 weeks down there, and they were going to release him the next week, but a hurricane was coming through. So they shipped him back to Hattiesburg. So we got to stay there for 2 more weeks because they had a different rule in letting him out. But, he was about 5.5 weeks old when he finally came home. He was 4 pounds when he was born, and he came home at 6 pounds. And now he's huge, for a 5-year-old. We were looking the other night, he's the average weight of an 8-year-old and the average height of an 8-year-old. So, he's made out pretty good. But, I was always thankful for God getting us through that and for God, taking care of my baby. But it was a few years before I was really grateful for the comfort that he gave us. The whole time I had I just had a feeling, everything's going to be okay. And I know that came from him, but I kind of took advantage of that, not giving him the credit for it. And it was a while before I really realized, the power of God in a situation like that. And it goes back to that scripture, my weakness shows his power perfect. and it shows how he really got us through that situation. And, now he's good, and 3 years later we had Ryder, same kind of thing, not the NICU thing, but 4 weeks early, hey, I think my water's just broke, so we're rushing back to the hospital, have a baby that's a month early, but he was good, came home 2 days later, no problems, and he's wild now. And then last November, I'm at work and I get a call and she tells me that we've got number 3 on the way. And I was nervous, but I was excited. We were thinking, this is going to be awesome. We're going to have 3 kids. How are we going to keep up with a 3rd kid like the first 2 we got? If this one's as wild as the first 2, there's no way. We're going to have to buy another house, And so all those kind of things. And then we go to the doctor a few months later and we find out that we're having a baby girl. And I like to talk a lot of trash and tell you that I didn't want a girl. But man, I was so excited. I get to have my little girl. So, we go home, and then a few days later, I remember we were sitting in bed, and we start talking about names. We've got 2 crazy names, so we'll come up with a 3rd one, So we're sitting there in bed, and it's hard for us to pick a name. So we're talking about all these different names. She doesn't like anything I like. I don't like anything she likes. And then she says Paisley, and I was just like, oh my gosh, it's perfect. I love it. So we're sitting there, and we're talking about it, and man, I've never cried tears of joy in my life, ever. I've never understood it doesn't make sense to me why you cry if you're happy until that night. And I guess it was, we came up with a name and it made everything real. It sealed the deal. I was having a baby girl. I was going to get to, I'm thinking in my head of all these things that I'm going to get to do with her. I'm thinking, I'm looking forward to when she holds my finger when she comes out. And I'm looking forward to feeling that love that I hear about a daddy has for his little girl. I'm just pumped. I was so excited that I cried in bed that night. And we've had 2 boys that have shared 2 different rooms in the house. We never had to redo anything for them. They're boys. We just put furniture in there. Well, we got a girl coming now, so we go through all, everything. We paint the room. We drove from Mobile to Covington to the coast trying to find the perfect dresser for the room. Got the name on the wall, got the chandelier up, everything, went through all that. And we're preparing, and we know that it's coming soon because both the babies have been early. And then the morning of June the 5th, I wake up to hear my wife crying in pain. So we load her up in the car and rush her to the hospital. And when we get there, they bring us back to this little room. And they put us in there, and they immediately, they strap the heart monitor on the baby. And within just the first few minutes of being there, they get the baby's heartbeat. So that's a relief, We get there, we get to hear the baby's heartbeat. And so at that point, I'm thinking, we're going to be good. And she's on the way, has already called the 2 doctors that she wants there. And, they're already on their way. They get there in about half an hour, and he's talking to us about what's going on, what they're about to do. They're going to take her back, and they're going to do an emergency C-section on her. So, I'm thinking, okay, here in a few minutes we're going to have a baby. So I'm getting ready, and the doctor pulls me to the side and says, look, the baby, we've got a good heartbeat, but we're going to have to do an emergency C-section, so we're going to have to put your wife to sleep. You're going to have to sit here while we take her back. So I'm by myself. It's like 2:30 in the morning. I don't like going to Walmart by myself. I don't like being alone, So I'm thinking, oh, man, I don't know how I'm going to get through sitting here while they've got my wife and my baby girl in the back room, and I don't know what's going on. And so I sit down and I start praying, and I could immediately feel the comfort just blanketed over me, And so I sit there for about half an hour, not knowing what's going on, and I'm just pacing the floor and praying. And my grandmother eventually comes up, and about 15 minutes later, a couple nurses and a doctor come running down the hall with a baby, and I didn't get to hear that cry that I waited to hear from Steele. It wasn't there. And so at that moment, I knew what had happened. So the doctor comes in, and he tries to explain to me what happened, and all I can think about is, how's my wife, how's Amy Leah doing? I want to see her, I want to be there with her. They bring Amy Leah out about 15 minutes later, and they're putting her in the room. And, I wanted to be in there when they told her. because I'm thinking, I don't know how I'm going to comfort her, but it's my job. I'm her husband. I've got to find a way to bring her some kind of comfort. I don't know what to say to her. I don't know what to do. I'm praying for knowledge. I don't know what to say. And when I walk into the room, they've already told her. So I go in there, and she's already been in there for a few minutes before they finally let me see her. And I walk in there, and she's already heard the news. And she's still drugged up, so she's extremely upset. And I'm all these things are going through my head. How's she going to take this? How are we going to make it through this? How is she? Is she going to go crazy, or is she going to be able to? What's she going to do? I just didn't know what to do. Didn't know what to think. How am I going to comfort her? What can I say to make this better? Because I just lost the baby that I love too, and I don't know what to do. And I'm hoping that she's not going to come out of this angry, but I just don't know what to expect. And I can remember as her medicine started wearing off, and she was sitting in the bed, and she was upset, and she reached her hand out to me and said, "We need to pray." And I felt such relief in that, because it showed me that I didn't have to be the one to try to comfort her. She was clinging to Jesus for that. And she's shown me more strength and more faith than I've ever seen in anybody since this has happened. And I thank God every morning for that. So we had the funeral and made it through all that. And then about a week later, the next week I went back to work. And it was amazing. And all the people that had heard or that had come by the store just to tell me they were thinking of us and they were praying for us. And, I couldn't believe the help that we got just from people that I barely know or from the church. I've never understood what a church family was until we went through this. And I go back to work, and everybody's telling me, nobody knows what to say. And I understand that, because I don't know what they would say either. But a handshake or a hug meant just as much as trying to say anything. But I had one guy that came in the store, and he came up to me and he said, "Hey, Charles told me the other day what happened. I didn't know till after the funeral and everything." And he said, "I really don't know what to say to you." He said, "But I was sitting up front and I was watching you back here." And I don't say this to brag at all. I say this because it brings truth to the scripture I read tonight. But he walks back there and he tells me, "I've been up here watching you, and all I see is Jesus." He said, "I've been watching you back here walking around, and I can see the glory of God through everything you're dealing with." And that was the best compliment I've ever heard. That was the most refreshing thing that I've heard since all this has happened. And I was thinking, when I read that scripture yesterday, that's the first thing I thought of, was him coming in and telling me that. Because what better, there's not a better way to show the truth of that verse, where Jesus says, "My grace is sufficient for you. My power is made perfect in your weakness," than that. To see that God's glory is showing through what we're walking through. And I told you earlier that it was kind of crazy to tell you the meaning of the names of our first two kids, but I'd get to it. After we picked the name Paisley, we said, well, we got to see what that name means too. And so we pulled out the book, or the phone, and we looked it up, and all of our kids' names are either English or Scottish. It just kind of worked out like that. And Paisley was a Scottish name, and it means church. And I remember reading that and saying, how in the world is she ever going to live up to that? Steele he's stubborn and strong-willed. He lives up to that perfect. And Ryder's wild, and, he lives up to the mountain warrior thing pretty good. But how can somebody live up to church? And really, I don't know any better way that she could live up to her name other than showing that God is glorified through her death. And that's really what we want more than anything. As bad as I want to hold my baby girl again, and I want to kiss her on the forehead tonight, I want God's word to be shown through her life. Mr. Charlie, will you close us in prayer for me, please?